The following podcast is an exclusive presentation of Project Entertainment Network.
Hey folks, Brian Keene here. You know, summer's over. We're entering the fall and then the winter. Halloween's coming up, Thanksgiving, and then of course the holiday shopping season. Speaking of the holiday shopping season, let me tell you about subculturecorsets.com. They've got everything you need for everyone on your list for this holiday season. Clothing, accessories, gifts, books, you name it, they've got it. They sponsor every show on the Project Entertainment Network, including this one. So please give them your business. Visit subculturecorsets.com.
Project Entertainment Network presents You Gotta Be Fucking Kidding, debunking today's modern myths, with hosts, speculative fiction writers Skip Novak and Tom Clark. Bigfoot, Elvis, Illuminati, JFK, New World Order, Flat Earth, reptilians, all popular modern conspiracy theories, all complete bullcrap, and we'll tell you why.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
Project Entertainment Network's first, patron-exclusive, podcast. Project Entertainment Network presents My Favorite Story, an anthology featuring short fiction written by the hosts of the Project Entertainment Network podcasts, with
Mary Sangiovanni and Brian Keene from The Horror Show,
Chuck Border, Aaron Sweet, El Mahari, and Armand Rosamilia of The Mando Method, Jeannie Engel of Origins,
Bizung's Mr. Frank,
Tom Clark from Necrocast, It On, It Cooks, Amber Fallon,
Three Guys with Beards, Christopher Golden, Jim Moore and Jonathan Maybury,
The Buttercup of Doom, Kelly Owen,
Matters of Faith's Jay Wilburn,
John Urbancic of Ink Stains.
My Favorite Story, a podcast author anthology from Project Entertainment Network, available on Kindle, Nook, and soon in paperback from the Project Entertainment Network store.
There shall come a podcast like no other. Defenders Dialogue with Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Marvel Comics' original superhero non-team convenes once again. The Incredible Hulk, the Savage Submariner, the Master of the Mystic Arts, Doctor Strange, and a dynamic supporting cast of Marvel superheroes battle against evil as the Defenders. Without further ado, true believers, here's your hosts, Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Excelsior!
And welcome back once again to Defenders Dialogue. I'm Brian Keene.
And I am Christopher Golden. And Brian, I'm happy that you survived your recent bout with Captain Trips.
I'll tell you what, I'm 50 years old, Chris, just like you, and you know, this is not my first dance with the flu, but I have never had a virus knock me on my ass the way this year's flu bug did. And I apologize to our listeners. Obviously, we weren't here last week. That's because I really did. I had Captain Trips. I was waiting for Randall Flagg to show up in my room and make me an offer.
It is pretty scary. But I would ask you, actually, if you had Captain Trips, whether you are Larry Underwood or Tom Cullen. That is my question.
Moon. That spells Keene. No, I even as a young man, I guess I read The Stand. Oh, I might have been 12, 13, 14 years old when I first read that. Even back then, I identified with Larry Underwood. I am so not surprised. His interactions with his mother and with other people around him and what he wanted in life, you know. So yeah, I'm Team Underwood all the way. But I do love
my guy was Nick Andros.
Oh, I could definitely see that.
So it doesn't surprise me that you identified with Larry and I identified with Nick. That's no surprise at all. Now, I also should warn people, though I do not have Captain Trips yet, I am sick. I do have a cold, so forgive me if disgusting noises come from my direction.
Well, listeners of your other podcast, Three Guys with Beards, they're used to hearing that on a weekly basis, so this should be no different, right?
Well, that's right.
I also want to remind folks, this week's show is going to be a little shorter than normal. Not only does Chris have a cold, but I am in the midst of finishing up a pilot, which is due 7 days from now. It'll be due 6 days from when you're listening to this. So we're going to keep it short. Also, we were hoping to have Scott Edelman on at the end of this week's episode, You'll find out why when we get to the end of this week's episode. I just got a text from him, Chris, as you and I are recording this. He is currently at a VA hospital playing his ukulele for the patients. I'm not making that up. You know what?
Good for Scott.
So he is going to call us for our next recording session.
Excellent. All right, that's good to know for the future. That's
All
not
right.
Scott's fault, by the way,
That's
folks.
right.
We
So
literally Brian texted him just as we were about to start recording. So
that's right.
So we're starting.
So
with,
let's get into the Defenders, issues 53 to 55, which is a saga called The Power Principle.
Yeah, 53 is the Power Principle Part 1, The Prince and the Presence, which it's a little too much alliteration for me. But it is written by Dave the Dude Craftsman. That's not right. David Anthony Kraft. Let's see here. Dave Cockrum, Keith Given, Mike Golden, and Terry Austin all on art. So this is clearly one of those, hey, we're way behind schedule, everybody pitch in issues. So when we're commenting on the art, we'll probably refer to Giffen, but who knows who actually drew these pages. You go through...
Cockrum and Mike Golden, they're stylistically, especially Cockrum, very easy to pick out. And it's interesting here. You like the opening splash page. That's clearly Dave Cockrum, but you see some, like you look at Nighthawk and Hellcat. That's obviously Giffen, and you look at the expression on Namor and Hulk. That's obviously Mike Golden. So it's interesting how this all came together.
Okay, obvious to you, but not to me. But some of it is obvious to me, but to differentiate between the facial expressions and it's just not my, I don't have that skill.
Hey, Chris.
Yes, Brian.
I want to remind folks that we record this live over Skype. I am losing you, dude. You're cutting in and out.
Really?
Yeah. You're fine now, but there for a while I was getting like every other word.
Interesting. Well, we shall see. I mean, it looks like it's picking me up fine.
All right.
Tommy Clark will tell me otherwise if it turns out shit, and we'll just have to do it again. So,
all right.
So let's pretend you can hear me, and go back. Now, we read this because of Brian's illness. We read these issues a few weeks ago, or a couple weeks ago.
Right.
But or at least I did because I did my homework, Brian. I don't know if you did.
I did. Just to recap everybody, and if you're reading along with us, you get a recap at the beginning of the issue. But basically, we open with the Defenders, the current team of Hellcat, Nighthawk, Hulk, and Submariner, on board one of Submariner's Atlantean undersea submarines. And they are on their way to Atlantis.
They're on their way to Atlantis because there's a doohickey, as there always seems to be, that is about to explode with radiation and potentially destroy all of Atlantis.
Right. Now, unknown to them, but known to us, the readers, that doohickey is the doings of the mysterious Sergei, however you pronounce it.
Sergei, a.k.a. The Presence.
Right. He is a Russian super scientist, super villain who wants to set off some nuclear explosions and be reborn in the blast. And not just him. He's brainwashed our other Defender, the Red Guardian,
yes,
into joining him in this endeavor.
Dr. Tanya Belinsky. So we get a we get a recap of where we are now. We get a nice splash page of Atlantis. We get some fun sort of banter showing the Defenders in Atlantis, including the Hulk, who's like the other Defenders, wearing the fishbowl on his head that allows him to breathe air. And he says he's complaining about wearing the fishbowl on his head. He doesn't like that.
That's right. But then they make Hulk happy. They have a big, grand Atlantean feast for Prince Namor and his friends, and it's all you can eat, which is good for Hulk. Hulk likes that.
Yeah, And I do love this moment where they go in to have the meeting to discuss the plight of Atlantis. Namor calls it to order, and it's all these men are in the room. At the Submariner's stern command, all his subjects, but the council members, file from the vast chamber. All the performers and all the women. All the women, that is, with the notable exception of the happy-go-lucky Hellcat. And Patsy clearly feels the attention on her in the room, and she says, "Gee, don't look at me, fellas. I'm just one of the gang." Which is
basically we find out that they have built a special ship for the Defenders. It will be outfitted with radiation shielding, and they've charted a course. There's an undersea subterranean network.
Of course, there is.
Where this danger to Atlantis is coming from, and that is where they are going to send the Defenders. And of course, that underground network is the hideout of the mysterious man known as codename Sergei.
I love that Kraft just couldn't decide on a name for him.
I know.
Sergei, codename Sergei, the Presence.
That's right.
Yeah, very interesting. Anyway, I've expressed before that the whole, and I think you agreed, that the whole Presence storyline is kind of goofy.
It is goofy. I remember I didn't read the entire thing because I was buying these issues off the newsstand, but I know issue 54 I remember picking up, and that was my first introduction to this whole storyline. And I was like, what the hell has happened to Red Guardian? And who's this Ponzi glowing Russian guy? It's not my favorite story arc in the Defenders, for sure.
Well, then we get to the storyline I like better in this arc, which is the one that we get back to of Valkyrie trying to have a normal, ordinary life. She's contacted Clea because she can't find any of the other Defenders. There's no answer at the Riding Academy. There's nobody around. So she's trying to find them. Doctor Strange is not around, which is why she's asked Clea to help. So, she's upset. Clea's upset because she's having no luck. So Val just sort of goes about her business. She has her school books. She gets on the subway. The subway gets more and more crowded to the point where Valkyrie, surprise, Brian, Valkyrie loses her temper.
Yeah, we find out that even an Asgardian can be claustrophobic.
Yes, cannot handle being surrounded by all of these people on the subway. And all I could think is, she just shoves out her elbows to clear herself some space and says, "Enough, I cannot abide this intimacy with strangers. Stand away from me now." I've wanted to do that so many times. I think Jim Moore has done that, actually.
And the thought bubble reactions from the crowd around her are amusing. Dumb broad, and then another one thinks pushy feminist. Keep in mind, this is from the 70s, but you could translate it to now.
Yep, absolutely.
And then, before Val can lay waste to all the touchy-feely commuters around her, she sees that mysterious vigilante who we first saw in previous issues, Lunatik, and he's engaged in jumping the turnstiles without paying, and the cops are chasing him for it.
Valkyrie trips him, and he turns around to attack her, but when he sees her face, he stops as if he recognizes her.
That's
and then
right.
He runs off in the other direction. You're usually the one to do the spooky, hinty stuff. And
That's right.
As if he recognizes her.
As if he recognized her. More on that later, true believers.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, okay. Then we go back to our friends
we go back.
in Atlantis. Go ahead.
I like the way this page is constructed. And I don't know how to describe it to those listening. If you're reading along, you know what I'm talking about. On the left-hand side of the page, we have a panel grid going down that shows us what the Defenders are up to. In the middle of the page, we have a wall of text, sort of similar to what Steve Gerber used to do. And then on the right-hand side of the page, we have another panel grid going down showing us what Sergei and Red Guardian are up to. So this is all happening simultaneously. There's no right or wrong way to read this page, but it's an interesting experimentation in layout and, you know, the way the page is constructed.
It's an interesting experiment, Brian, but unfortunately, I land with the Incredible Hulk, who in panel 4 is lying down, and his thought balloon reads, "Hulk is bored, hopes something happens soon." Chris is also bored and hopes something happens soon. Fortunately,
it does.
It does. And there's a giant undersea earthquake that blows holes in their sub and the water rushes in. Apparently it's a killer quake that jolts all of Europe. Shit explodes. And of course the result is that codename Sergei, aka the Presence, has indeed been transformed into what I will call a Martian conehead.
Yes. Yes. A big, giant Martian conehead.
Having nothing to do with Mars, but he looks like a Martian conehead.
He looks sort of like, if anybody's ever seen Mars Attacks, he looks like one of those. But with some kind of funky Tony Stark Iron Man armor.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's standing there in the midst of this nuclear cloud, in the midst of this white heat of fission. He is now the Presence, whatever the hell that means.
All right, so it's funny, actually. I know a lot of people who would like to think of themselves as the Presence. Anyway.
Do you want to name names, or are you just going to drop?
No, I'll do that on Three Guys with Beards or The Horror Show with Brian Keene.
Okay.
But not on this show. This is a comic show, not about the horror community.
That's right. We then have a little backup story featuring Clea, which I thought was great.
Yeah, this is actually the best part of the issue, in fact.
Yeah, it's written by Naomi Bassner. Now, I have to admit, Chris, that was not a name I was familiar with.
Me either.
And I didn't have time to Google her, but yeah, I feel that I should do that and maybe report back to our listeners in the next episode. It's a really well done back. You and I have both written these short comic strips.
It's very hard.
It is. It's incredibly hard. You get 6, maybe 8 pages to tell a complete story with a beginning, middle, and end that, you know, a reader will enjoy. It's incredibly difficult to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and the other thing I want to comment on here, by the way, is the pencils are by a woman named Sandy Plunkett.
Right.
And I think they're great.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I really like this art, and I'm surprised that her name is not familiar to me.
Yeah. So yeah, we have a backup story with Clea. Now it's not it's not anything monumental. I don't know how much time we want to spend on it.
I think the important thing about it is that it's a Clea solo adventure. I mean, let's just, that to me is the only thing we need to focus on here. We don't need to sort of go through what the story is, but the important thing is it's a solo adventure for Clea in which she is the hero and she defeats the villain.
Right.
I mean, it's and I don't remember ever having seen that before this.
No. I mean, she's been obviously she's a supporting character in Doctor Strange's book. She's a member of the Defenders, but she's always sort of in the background, even in the Defenders. Yeah, I mean, there have been moments, especially during Steve Gerber, where Clea comes to the forefront. But yeah, it's nice to see her solo.
Right, and this is her adventure.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think she had an issue of Marvel Team Up, but there she's sharing that spotlight with Spider-Man.
Right.
So yeah, it's nice to see just this solo adventure. And I wish she's a character I wish Marvel would do more with.
Yeah, interesting. So I liked that. I'd like to see more of this kind of stuff in present day comics. I liked it when they did Marvel Comics Presents and Solo Avengers or Avengers Spotlight or whatever it was called. some of those stories were trashy or, not good, but some of them were great. And I liked seeing, lesser known characters get their moment in the sun.
I agree.
But in any case, we move on to Defenders 54.
Fantastic cover. One of my favorite covers from the entire Defenders run.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Basically, for those not reading along at home, the cover is Hulk, Namor, Hellcat, Nighthawk underwater in the wreckage of their submarine. You see a random Atlantean soldier's body floating next to them, and there are some giant monster hands reaching up from the depths.
Exactly. No, it's a great cover. This one is written by Kraft again, and the artists are Keith Giffen and Mike Golden, with Bob McLeod on inks. Yeah.
And the Giffen Golden team, they work really well together. I like the art in this issue.
Yeah. I mean, my only issue with Mike Golden is the number of times people have told me they love my art.
You were great on Micronauts, dude. I used to read the shit out of that back in the day.
Yeah, I drew the hell out of that when I was in 4th grade or whatever. In any case, we go back through where this is actually a pretty great sequence of the Defenders dealing with the fact that their sub is exploding and being flooded, and they're in jeopardy.
So all that pressure has imploded the sub. Water's rushing in. Hulk's plan is to smash the water. In fact, that's what he suggests. Hulk will smash water.
Yep. And then this line I love, when Nighthawk and Hellcat are trying to hold the ship together the way Spider-Man does in the latest Spider-Man movie. Hulk says, "Bah, stupid water is everywhere. Hulk should have known this would happen. Fishman is friend, but Hulk was fool to go underwater with him in puny ship."
That's right.
And all I want to say is, yes, Hulk, yes, you were.
And of course, all of this is a result of the nuclear explosion that Sergei, a.k.a. the Presence, set off. We then transition to that explosion, where in the middle of the explosion, in the middle of the mushroom cloud, we see Sergei and Red Guardian, I don't know how else to describe it, basically being transformed into something else.
Hand in hand.
Hand in hand.
Yeah. But I also find it interesting, Brian, that on the final page of the last issue, we saw Sergei by himself post-transformation. Now we're seeing it as if it hadn't happened already. But that's okay. This page is one of the pages I remembered from this story and really liked.
Yeah.
Is this moment of them becoming something new. And it looks like they're being X-rayed in red, basically.
Right. Right. We go back to the ship, and things are bad for the Defenders. Nighthawk is drowning. He's banged his head on the hull, and he's blacked out. Hellcat's drowning. Hulk, meanwhile, is thrashing around, reminding the reader once again that he hates water. There's a lot of that with Kraft in these issues, where he repeats information that the reader already has. But just in case you forgot, Hulk hates water. But then he realizes that his friends are in trouble, and he decides that he will help his friends. He will face down his fear of the water, and he will help his friends.
Then we have Hellcat saving Nighthawk's life. And she's about to try to get a little bit of air for herself to last a little bit longer when something grabs her leg and pulls her down.
That's right.
Then, Brian, we cut away back to New York, where Valkyrie has allowed herself to be persuaded to go with Dollar Bill, the creeper known as Dollar Bill.
The much-loathed Dollar Bill. And, we didn't comment. We commented on how we both just despise and loathe Dollar Bill. But what we didn't comment on?
What's that?
They got rid of Jack Norris and gave us this asshole instead.
Well, it is weird I mean, it is weird, really, that Jack Norris, Jack Norris was a typical character of that era. He reminds me so much of Frank Drake from Tomb of Dracula.
Yeah.
And yeah, Jack was like a good guy, a frustrating guy, but a guy trying to understand. And you're right. We've been now given Dollar Bill in his stead, and Dollar Bill is, well, let's just say he's a member of the Trump administration, clearly. So basically, Dollar Bill is a filmmaker, or fancies himself a filmmaker, folks, and he's decided his great piece of art is going to be the film he's making about himself.
Right.
It's his autobiography on film, and he has persuaded Valkyrie to come up into his house and watch in his little private theater and watch the Dollar Bill story. And by the way, in the logo for his film, the word dollar is represented by the dollar sign. Almost like Kesha saw this comic book once upon a time and decided that's where she was going to change her name. So it's the Dollar Bill sign Bill story.
So basically, we get treated to an origin story for a supporting character that nobody likes.
Right.
It's boring, and Valkyrie thinks it's boring too because at the end of the page she's fallen asleep.
and he doesn't understand why his charm is not working on her. Anyway, we go back to the Defenders. They're being attacked by the giant undersea hand that we saw on the cover, the hand from the depths. Namor saves Hellcat. Hulk saves Nighthawk. And they all sort of escape the trouble that we're in. And then, Brian...
But wait.
Oh, sorry. What did I skip?
There's one thing there I don't want to gloss over.
Okay.
Because it's, as I said, Kraft, he's not Steve Gerber. But you do start to get a sense that he's finally figuring out who these characters are. Because there's a 4-panel sequence where Hulk is saving Nighthawk, and he admits Hulk is afraid for friend.
Yeah.
He sometimes bird nose makes Hulk mad, but Hulk hopes he isn't. No, bird nose still lives. So it's a nice little sequence here. Where once again, reminding the reader these aren't just a team of superheroes. This is a family.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I think that's it's not an episode of This Is Us, but there is some humanity and emotion there. I like that. And it does show that Kraft is doing more with these characters than just putting them through their paces, for sure.
Right.
And when I say I don't like certain things or, we make fun of the presence, it doesn't mean that we don't think Kraft has wildly improved from his first few issues.
Exactly. And he improves on the next page because he gives us a segment with Jack Norris.
Oh, shit. Hold on. Sorry. Go ahead.
Now, longtime listeners know Jack Norris is one of my favorite characters in this book. Okay? But we get a 3-panel sequence with Jack driving in his car, thinking about being a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. And that's it. Nothing else happens. Dollar Bill gets a whole goddamn page. Jack Norris gets 3 panels.
Oh, anyway, all right. So the Defenders managed to reach the surface. They're going to be okay. And then, of course, who shows up, Brian?
The Presence.
Codename Sergei. And the Red Guardian. And they're now basically nuclear.
Right. Now, I want to ask Giffen when we have him on. I want to ask him who designed the Presence in this new form. Keith was a big fan of Jack Kirby.
Yeah, it's definitely a Kirby.
Yeah, I mean it's what's the guy's name in New Gods? Metron.
Yeah, I can't think.
I was never a big New Gods fan, but it's sort of a callback to that on this final page here.
For sure. Yeah. Also, I want to point out, anybody who's reading the floppy comics, if you're not reading the floppy comics, one of the things I like to do when I am is glance at the names of the people who write in to the letters page. And one of the letters in this issue is from one Peter B. Gillis, who would later go on to write Doctor Strange and other various Marvel characters.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and Gillis, talented writer. So happy to see
very
him
much
there.
so.
Now, weirdly, Brian, I feel like we shouldn't talk about this next backup without Scott, because Scott wrote it. The backup in the back of this issue is a Nick Fury Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. backup. Written by Scott Edelman, drawn by Juan Ortiz. Now, I don't really want to say anything more about it, except to say that it has no business being stuck in the back of this comic just because Fury was in an arc of the Defenders, even though it wasn't even Fury, it was an LMD, and Fury appeared in one issue as not an LMD. This backup, while it's a good, fun Nick Fury backup story written by our friend Scott, to me, I was like, why is this even here? It's got nothing to do with the Defenders. Fury is not a Defender, except that it's an LMD story, so I don't know.
See, I have to wonder, we mentioned Jack Norris, his little 3-panel segment where he's thinking about, being a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, and it just seems so shoehorned into the rest of the issue.
Yeah, maybe it's there to set up for the presence of that backup.
Yeah, I have to wonder if, Archie Goodwin was the editor at the time, if he just said, hey, we need something to tie in the S.H.I.E.L.D. backup. For
people who haven't read previous issues, we need an acknowledgement that Nick Fury is connected to this story.
Right.
All right. So our last issue that we're going to go over today, Defenders 55, written by Kraft, pencils, Brian, by Carmine Infantino.
My second least favorite comic artist of all time.
Of all time?
Of all time.
Of all time. That is saying something.
All time.
Wow. With inks by Klaus Janson. But of all time is saying something, I must admit.
Yeah, second least favorite of all time.
I mean, I'm looking at these
I don't know the
pages
man.
I'm thinking...
it's not anything about his character or who he was.
If you flip through the current Diamond previews, I am quite certain you could find dozens of artists that I would definitely put below Carmine Infantino.
Oh yeah, I mean, all the ones grown in vats on the farm wherever Marvel gets them from these days. Sure, but I don't even count them because we don't even know their names. I'm talking about
the artists that you read as a kid.
Yeah, I'm talking about the legends,
Okay.
And Carmine Infantino, my second least favorite. I think I was first exposed to him on either Star Wars or The Flash. I can't remember which, but didn't care for it, and he did not grow on me over time.
Huh. Interesting. Well, I don't, I'm not a fan, but I'm not, I don't feel, I'm neutral. How's that? And in the Infantino question, I am a neutral party. I'm Switzerland. Okay. So as far as this wrap up, however, I guess in some ways I'm also neutral. And if I'm not neutral, I'm anti, because honestly, there's not a lot to say about it.
No, it's
exactly what you think it's going to be. Right?
The Defenders show up. They confront the Presence. They fight.
I mean, the only thing about this... Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, they realize that, Red Guardian's been taken over by this guy. And then, the only interesting thing is Nighthawk calling in the cavalry.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. So this issue is sort of bland and ordinary and typical until you get to page 10, when Nighthawk finds this giant Atlantean horn and blows it, accidentally summoning up a giant creature, the Behemoth from below.
That's right. We've seen him in Supervillain Team Up issue 13, and then we saw his hands in the last issue.
Yeah. Yep.
And he's a giant monster. He's a giant underwater monster.
Yeah, so he basically is now chasing Nighthawk, trying to destroy him. And we go back to the fight the Defenders are having, and the Behemoth from below intervenes just by appearing, which means that the Defenders now have to try to fight him, which is the Hulk sort of pounding on him. And when we get to the panel where the Hulk hits him for like the third or fourth time, nothing can stand up to Hulk. Nothing can stop Hulk. Hulk is strongest one there is, brick thing. And Hulk says, fall. The panel of the behemoth from below is like a panel of like a crying baby or a puppy that's really sad. You know, like it's just like, oh, the poor behemoth from below. You know, he was summoned by the blowing of a horn. Like he just wanted to play. And now Hulk is kicking his ass.
And speaking of kicking ass, we've got Hellcat versus Red Guardian, and Hellcat's trying to get her to remember that they are her friends and that she is a defender. And then that transitions into sort of an origin story for Red Guardian, which we've seen bits and pieces of in the Defenders before, but we never really got a complete one.
Right. And this is a nice succinct wrap-up of her origin.
Right.
And the funny thing is, again, when I think back on this comic, I remember that. That's one of the things I remember from reading this storyline is this image, the first panel of Red Guardian, where Hellcat is speaking to her, and then the flashback. Those two panels, I remember that pretty well from my childhood, which is interesting that that's something that would stand out. Anyway, so then we go back to the fight. The Red Guardian's been distracted by Hellcat. Excuse me, God. Then there's a bunch of panels of pages of ads for Zagnut bars. He says in flipping panels. But then I love the fact that the storyline basically devolves into the fight against the behemoth from below.
Right.
And the best thing about this story is that Hellcat taps into her mind powers to prevent the mind powers that Moondragon taught her when she went away from the Avengers with Moondragon to Titan to be trained to use her mind to become a better heroine. And she actually doesn't manage to lift up the behemoth from below, but she manages to stop it from falling long enough to rescue Red Guardian and drag her out from beneath so she won't be crushed.
Right.
Which is kind of cool, actually. It
is very cool. And it's something that we don't see her use a lot of in the Defenders until later on. It's sort of like a few issues ago we talked about, when Submariner and Hulk were tearing up Manhattan, we get to see Submariner use his electrical powers.
Right,
it's
exactly.
something he has, but no writer ever has him use. It's the same thing here with this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's totally funny. I mean, I had forgotten that Hellcat even had that. Completely forgotten. That even about her going off with Moondragon until we read her introduction into the Defenders, I'd forgotten that even happened, and I'd forgotten about this mind power, or that she ever used it until we got to this point. So, anyway,
right. Well, Sergei, he's not happy about them taking Red Guardian away from him, so he drops a nuclear explosion on the Defenders.
Of course, he does.
Which first of all turns the Hulk back into Bruce Banner, somebody who we don't get to see a lot of in this comic. And basically, everyone is affected by this nuclear blast, except for Namor and Banner and Red Guardian. And then, the Presence is standing there threatening them. Basically, he's going to talk them to death. And Red Guardian confronts him, and I don't know. She basically talks him into going away and leaving him alone.
Yeah, but I mean, she's basically saying, "You don't love me. You love your dream."
Yeah, I mean, it's the most uneventful denouement.
Yep.
In comics, they let the supervillain go. This guy just blew up half of Europe.
Right. Not to mention part of Atlantis.
Yeah.
And she basically says, you've been a bad boy, and you don't really love me, and I don't love you. So go away. And he goes away, and then everybody's feeling pretty sick.
And Banner points out that probably because they have terminal radiation poisoning.
Yeah, Bruce Banner's like, hey, listen, I don't know what just happened because I was the Hulk when it happened, but you all look like you were suffering from the symptoms of terminal radiation poisoning. So yeah, that's not good.
It's not good at all.
Then we have an epilogue, Brian. And I know you love this bit, so have at it.
Meanwhile, dusk in Manhattan on the campus of Empire State University, we have Valkyrie and Ledge. You guys remember Ledge. He's Dollar Bill's sidekick. They're walking along talking, and Ledge asks Valkyrie out on a date. And she doesn't understand what a date is. She thinks he wishes to offer her some dried fruit. But before Ledge can explain, Lunatik emerges from an alleyway, pushes Ledge aside, and says he wants to have words with Valkyrie. And Val draws Dragon Fang, her sword, transforms into Valkyrie in full costume, and that's where the issue ends.
And let me just point one thing out. In the 1970s, you could write this line: Lunatik lives to put pizzazz into practice. I'm just waiting for Jimmy J.J. Walker from Good Times to show up and say, "Dynamite!"
Well, yeah, we should mention the alley is full of some dope dealers who Lunatik is just at least beaten into submission, possibly killed. So yeah, he could emerge from the alley and say, "Lunatik has put those dope peddlers right through the power of dynamite."
Oh my God! Oh
yes,
my God.
I lived to watch that show every week when I was a kid. JJ would. Some people like the Fonz, and yeah, the Fonz was okay, but I was all about him.
The Fonz, see, we're gonna have this conversation, Brian, about the 70s. The Fonz was okay, but JJ meant it.
Exactly.
The Fonz was putting on a show. The Fonz was a facade.
Exactly.
He was putting it on, as like a jacket. But with JJ, that was for real.
That's right.
Oh my God! Well, that's a whole other podcast. All the TV shows we watched in the 70s.
All right. So next week, will the Defenders die of radiation poisoning?
Well, we'll find out if next week is called the all new, not dead Defenders. And on that note,
in the meantime, before we go,
you know what we didn't say today?
What?
Excelsior.
Well, we didn't say that.
I've been sick. That's why I didn't remember to say Excelsior.
We did remind people about Three Guys with Beards and the Horror Show with Brian Keene, both of which are available right here on the Project Entertainment Network, on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Google Play Music, and all other platforms. But the one thing we did not mention is our engineer, Tommy Clark. Every week, Tommy valiantly tries to make us sound good. And we thank him for that. And please support him. Check out his podcast, The Necrocasticon, also available right here on the Project Entertainment Network. So that's all I've got, Chris. You got anything else?
Only that next week we'll be discussing at least issues 56, 57, and 58 of the Defenders.
Plus Scott Edelman.
Brian, this is important. And I only want to point out that it's important because in issue 57, we see a special guest star. Ms. Marvel, Carol Danvers, will guest star.
That's right.
And then, in issue 58, not only do we have the return of Doctor Strange, Brian, but do you know who appears for the first time in the pages of the Defenders?
I would go out on a limb here and say one of my favorite Marvel characters, one of my favorite Defenders, and a character whose comic book I've actually written, and that would be Devil Slayer.
You are correct, sir. Devil Slayer. Right. Eric Simon Payne, Devil Slayer appears. So, we have a lot to talk about in the next episode.
Yes, we do. All right. We'll see you next week, folks.
Take care. Excelsior!
Three Guys with Beards. The Project Entertainment Network store, featuring t-shirts, mugs, stickers, hoodies and more from your favorite Project Entertainment Network podcasts.
Ink Stain Scribbler's Rest.
The Horror Show with Brian Keene.
Why not show your loyalty by wearing a cool product from the podcast group and show off to your friends?
It Cooks.
Armcast.
The Mondo Method Monster Attack.
Necrocastical.
Go to projectentertainmentnetwork.com and click on the store tab for more details.
The Liars Club podcast.
Pizan.
The Lunch Ladies Book Club.
Matters of Faith.
The Project Entertainment Network store, stacked with stuff from the best podcasts on the internet.
The Curtain Jerkers.
Buttercup of Doom.
www.projectentertainmentnetwork.com.
This has been an exclusive presentation of the Project Entertainment Network.